Hey everybody. Sorry, running a little bit late here. But yeah, just about to hop on. Let me go ahead. We'll talk about a couple of things that I have done already to that I've done on the side here as well. Apparently, I've not signed into the chat. Here, let's see. Let's just do it this way. Okay, I got the chat on the. Give me one moment. I got the chat over here. I can use this. People. Okay, and I'm also gonna wanna. Okay. Yeah, I think we're on. Um, cool. Start on a moment here. Just kind of wait for a viewer rate to come in. Once we get a little bit more information here. Actually, you know what? Okay, it looks like we might have somebody on here. I'm also going to try to get this chat running through OBS real quick. Give me one sec. Chat. Where's the chat? Let's see. Okay, nah, it's fine. I'll just use it in the browser. Hey, thank you for your kind message. Yeah, I'm doing what I can. It's a little rough. I just have to figure out some things in my life, but I'm hoping that at the end of it, I'll be in a much better spot. But I'm just gonna have to keep pushing through. But I appreciate the kind message. Thank you. Um, anyway, um, yeah, I'm just gonna use the chat here on the web browser. I'm not gonna screw with it in OBS. Anyway, so we're just gonna kind of continue where I left off with the last stream. But before I do that, just kind of mention a couple things that I was kind of thinking in regards to streams. Is that originally I wasn't much of a fan of streaming, but I think the main reason for that was because I didn't like the idea of figuring out things on the fly. I just didn't want to waste people's time. Not that I want to waste anybody's time, but I think it kind of matters less with streams now because part of the reason we stream is I think people like to see the process, even if that means just kind of sitting there and thinking about it. So I think I'm just gonna continue streaming, and it's a way to kind of keep me um, continuing to make content. One of the other really good benefits of the stream that I'm kind of finding lately is that I can record a lot of the footage I use for the videos by just streaming, and then I can use that as my footage in the video when I edit it, rather than trying to go and try to fetch it separately. So if I do it through the stream, it's just a lot easier. It saves some time. Plus, this real time stream gives the benefit to everyone who joins. They can ask questions about things, and we could kind of go from there. Plus, it's like a community. It's like sometimes what also kind of happens too is that sometimes somebody will say, "Oh, you could do this," and I'll be like, "Oh, that's a good idea." So, just some good things to think about. Um, so anyway, I think what I want to do is kind of go back to where we left off from the last time. So, on the last time we had this, I also going to bring up the character animation. I'll just go pull it in the other window real quick. Um, yeah, this looks fine. So yeah, so we had the character animation as well. So basically what we did is we created a bow and we kind of blocked out this bow shooting animation as well. Actually, I could probably just play it. Yeah. So what we're going to do today is I've actually made a few changes to the bow itself to try to make the rig a little bit more, useful. And then we'll just kind of work on tidying up this animation and then we'll integrate it into Godot. Um, so that's kind of what I'm going to try to do today. Probably about 2 hour stream or so, unless I get finished sooner, but I don't think I will. So we'll kind of just start from there. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. I'm gonna hit the record button here too. All right. So one thing I would show you that I did this last night, kind of in preparation for the stream, but I did find a way to make the rig a little bit more responsive than what we had before. Because what we had before was we just kind of used the auto IK, but we can actually set up an IK on the rig manually. It's just I didn't really know how to do it on the fly, so I actually did find some tutorials to help me through that. Um, so yeah, just to show you what this looks like. So there's this base bone still, and then there's an IK here. This is just, and if you go to on Blender, there's the bone constraints. You have to do this in pose mode, by the way. But there's the IK. You just kind of pick the armature, and this bone here is an IK.L, and basically what that does is it's kind of like a target that we can use, and it points this bone toward this bone basically, and then you just set the chain link to the number of bones. So this, in this case, it was 7. So this goes from here all the way to this bone. And then you just repeat it on the other side. So this IK bone is kind of pointing to downwards. But yeah, this bone points to the IK bone. And then this bone right here is an IK bone. And this actually has its own constraint, which is called limit distance. And what it does is it prevents this from basically going too much further than the string itself. So I think I could probably change this, right? But it's probably better to leave it the way it was. Didn't mess with this distance that much, but the default value it gave me was fine. And then there's just a singular string bone right here, which you can kind of move this however you want, and it moves the string, and then the IK just follows. So what I like to do, let's just reset everything. Let me turn on screencast keys. That'll help too. I'm going to kind of change the font size a little bit too. Yeah, you can see that. That's pretty good. Okay. So yeah, so then what I like to do is hit G on the string, and then you can restrict it on the Y-axis, and now you can draw the bow. And then you could do kind of the same thing here. So what I did with this updated rig was I updated the pullback animation to, instead of use that auto IK, I used the I just drew the bow with this bone and the IK and just kind of kept it in this position. And then I also updated the fire animation just to kind of use the 3. In the final tutorial, I will link the sources I used as well to kind of figure this one out. But it does kind of make things a little bit more intuitive. Besides the setup, of course, it does feel better. So that's basically the change I made to the bow. So we could talk about the character animation next. So I think this bow is fine. We'll go over to the character animation. And this currently has the old bow on it that we use as a reference. Um, I'm going to try to import the new one. So I did manage to get that to work a little bit better. Um, oh wait, and I think I forgot to mention something too. With the IK bones on the bow, this IK bone has to, well, this one actually parents to this bone right here. The IK itself parents to the base bone, and so does the string. And the reason for that is because we can move the base bone, the whole bone goes, or the bow goes with it, right? That's the idea. Um, anyway, back to where we were. So I also have a way where I can kind of just import. I was also able to get this to work. So let's see. So I take this old bow, I just delete the hierarchy. I'm going to go ahead and do link. I just kind of find the old, or the new bow, right? It's going to be object, armature in the bow. And now we have a bow right here. So what I'm going to also do is just kind of go object mode, select the bow, which I can't do yet, right? Because it's in this bow ref container. So we want to move that. Before I do that though, I'm going to create a library override, which this is like allows you to link files in Blender, but still modify them. So that means if I made a change to the bow in the bow file, it would update in this file as well. It's not going to matter as much because I'm going to get rid of this when we're done with the animation, but we can use it as a frame of reference. So now we got the bow here. I'm going to go to pose mode and connect this to the character. So we're going to take this root bone, the base, and we're going to do a copy transforms to the armature and the weapon R. So that's going to be the right hand. So now the bone's connected to her. And now what's also really kind of cool is what we can do, although I'm not going to really commit this to the final version that we're going to have in Godot, but you could do this, is you could take this string bone, and you could also add constraint. But this time we're going to do location because we don't want to change the rotation at all, or the scale. So copy location, which also goes to this armature, and then we just have to say weapon L because she holds it with her left hand. So now you can see how you can see now how she holds the bow and that she can pull the string as well. So it's pretty neat. So let's go back to the character's armature and we can see how this kind of works now. The bow. And then see she draws it. And then boop. Yep, so let's actually just play it. So you can kind of see the motion here. Okay, so that's like one way you can reference it. So there is a little bit of issues with this. Like you can see kind of how the string looks a little goofy because of the way she has her hand there. I think one thing that I also kind of realized while doing this is that I don't think she wants her left hand to be right up against her right hand where the bow is. She would be holding the arrow. So the arrow would have some space in between it. I don't think I'm actually going to animate the arrow in here. I think we're just going to estimate it. I guess we could have made an arrow just to kind of get a feel for like the length. But I'm not going to worry about it. Because once we put stuff in the game, we could just kind of tweak it there. Is this the left hand? It's the right hand. Okay, let me grab the left hand. So I'm actually going to pull this back a little bit. I can also probably turn her shoulders a little bit to give her a little bit more leverage. There we go. Maybe not so much like that. Okay. I'm going to have to reset. Yeah, reset the arm a little bit. turn the hand. Pull it a little bit this way. A little bit this way as well. So like this is actually even in our pre-drawn state. And we'll just kind of move our shoulder out like that. Make it a little bit easier to see. Now the rig's probably going to have a little bit of issues too, but it's fine. I'd have to paint this a little bit better. I'm not going to worry about it. So like, okay, so now we have this, but also her arm. Yes, it should be closer to her chest. I'm also going to kind of move the shoulder so that, yeah, it would be more upright. Kind of like so. Okay, cool. So that should be the draw position. I could probably even move this if I wanted to, but I think that's fine. Do I need to update this shoulder? Actually, it was probably better the way it was. Okay. Yeah, that's good. So it's going to be a little bit kind of on an angle, but I think that's okay. We're just going to work with that. I'm going to rotate her hand too, just a little bit. So I'm trying to think, kind of visioning this. Because if you're reaching out, yeah, kind of. That's fine. Let's not make this perfect. It's fine. So we got this here. Just going to kind of keyframe it, make sure it's good. So you got the base, you got the pool here, and then you got the draw, the full draw, right? And then the release, and then the return to position. Okay, so now if we play it, so we can kind of see this still works pretty well. Okay. Alrighty. Alright, so now I think what we can do is we can update the animation. Also, I'm just going to make sure every keyframe is fully keyframed here. Yeah, working on the animation right now. It's going to be pretty bare bones. Nothing too fancy. I have to do some more research on how to make the animation look a bit better. But for now, I'm just going to kind of show the basic process. With like, we did the blocking, which was just kind of find the key frames that we want to pose. So we did that. We like the start, the initiation, the draw, basically the release, and then the return. So you kind of identify those, right? And then we can go ahead and do, and I made it so that it's constant, so we can just kind of feel the block, and we can feel the motion of the animation and the timing. The timing feels pretty good to me, because there's going to be a moment where she's got to grab the bow, and then and the longest part of the animation is going to be the part where she draws it back, and then the fire is kind of pretty quick. So that's really what you want to do with the blocking, is you kind of start from ground up. It's kind of like when you draw, you always start with a sketch, or even when you write code, you basically just kind of plug it in and get the work before you go and actually clean up anything. So yeah, so that's what I'm going to do. Now I think, since we have the bow and we have kind of this rig working, let's go ahead and tidy up the animation a little bit more. Um, so what I'm going to do is just select all the channels, and we're going to change the interpolation mode just to Bezier. It should go back, and you can kind of see now it's more like that. So it's a bit smoother now, but let's take a look. So I think the grab looks okay. So I think one caveat we can see here is that because I attached this bowstring to her left hand, it's going to follow her throughout the entire animation. What I would do in this situation, but I messed with it last night and I kind of had a problem with it, so I won't do it here. But what you would basically do is you would go to the bow itself, and then inside of the bow animation, it actually looks like what you would do is you would actually take this constraint over here, this copy location constraint, and you would add 0 influence to it on the parts where she's not holding it. So like for example right here, I would just make the influence 0, which I mean it looks kind of goofed, but that's because I have to go into pose mode and do it, right? So if I just kind of reset the bow position here on 0, we'll just kind of keyframe the whole thing. And then if I go to frame 3, I should be able to take the influence and keyframe that, right? And on 0, it should be 0 influence. But now it's going to tween the influence. So I'm actually just going to take frame 2 and just set the 0 there too. So now she's got that. And then you can just basically keep it that way until she releases it. So like that would be the release right here, right around here. Just going to draw it. Release. As my teacher said, first get it to compile. Yeah, absolutely. There's so much stuff you can do around code, like unit tests and all that stuff, and it's great. But like sometimes it's just easier to get the work first, and then after it works, it's like, okay, now it's time to clean it up, right? All right, so let's go ahead and go here. I'm trying to remember. Okay, yeah, I think this is just a sustain. Okay, so this is where she would release it. So the influence goes back to 0 here. And then we'll keep it at 1 here. So I think we should be good now, right? So you got this. She grabs it, pulls it back, and now the bow releases. So that's kind of what you could do there. Now, of course, this doesn't really animate, but that's fine. That's whatever. I'm not going to worry about that right now. Anyway, so that's what you could do. If I go back to the character now, let's go pose mode. And then let's see. I wanted to see if I can adjust a little bit of the animation's feel. Alright, so we got that. I think there needs to be like a little bit more recoil or sustain or something. Right? So we're going to have to, I think... Yeah, I think her return to position, we're going to have to move that to like frame 20. And then we'll just click this to scene range as well. There we go. It's a little bit better. It's a little bit slow just because the FPS isn't running at full speed. I think if I like change the rendering I'd have to probably turn off the outline on her. Let's see. I'm going to remove the bow reference too. Let's see. Actually, no, this is supposed to be out here. Give me one moment. All right, cool. So if we look, now another thing to kind of keep in mind here is, okay, so I want the game to run at 60 FPS, so let's try to see if we can get the animation timing to work a little bit better for us. I want to have to update the model. Let's see, so here's the model. Let's see. So if I turn the solidify off, it's okay. There we go. That's a lot closer to like what we're expecting to see. So now the animation looks like a lot faster. Now another thing to keep in mind too is my game itself is, it's like a pseudo action turn-based RPG combat style, but I think one thing that's going to be really important is that the animations are quick and snappy enough that like you can input a combo string. So I don't want the bow animation to feel super realistic, right? Because it will take a while for a person to kind of draw the bow and then fire it. We do need it to be fast enough so that the animation like can transition to other ones. But I think we also need, yes, turn-based, yeah. So it's actually kind of, I may as well show the game. Actually, I will bring it up momentarily. But yeah, it's a kind of a hybrid system. So the game is fundamentally turn-based because I personally love turn-based games. And I think one of the things I really like about turn-based games is that it gives you time to kind of think, and there's much more strategy involved. I do like action games, like I like action RPGs as well, but I don't enjoy them nearly as much because sometimes they just devolve into hacking and slashing. I wanted to make sure that my game still had that modern action feel, but still had the strategy elements involved. So there's a hybrid turn-based system in there as well. Um, so what basically kind of happens is you'll select a character, and that character has a pool of energy, so like 100 energy, and they can use that to move or attack or do basically any sort of action on their turn. Um, and then like you can, and the attacks are combo based as well. So like you'll have your standard attacks like this bow attack that we're doing here, and then you'll have your more specific arts that you can do. And then once you do that, it's so that's why if it was like one attack a turn, you could spend a little bit more time in the animation. It could be a little bit slower. Um, but I think you want the animation to be a little bit snappy, so that you can go A, B, C kind of thing, 1, 2, 3, and then you could kind of flow into other stuff. It might actually be easier if I show. Yeah, I'm not super familiar with Indivisible, but I think I know what you're saying. I think a good comparison might also be Xenogears, like the original one. Let's see. There we go. So, yeah, if I kind of showed the game as current state, which truth be told, I haven't really gotten a lot of work on it, to be honest. And yes, there's supposed to be bears. They are just cylinders right now. But the idea is like, you have that energy pool, right? And there's only this player phase that's done right now, but basically you can input your attacks, right? And then you can have like your special arts and stuff. I know it looks very janky right now, but I'm gonna have to kind of fix it at some point, but it's gonna take some work. There's a other mechanic in here where you can swap your weapons. So each character can equip up to 3 weapons to bring into combat. And there's this color system. You can kind of think of it like Fire Emblem's weapon triangle. Um, and then like you want to pick a color that's advantageous against the enemy you're fighting. So blue beats red, green beats blue, and red beats green, basically. Um, so I do more damage because I'm using the blue bow here. If I switch to the green one, I do less damage. So that's just kind of the idea. But kind of to show the flow of the game was that you would kind of get your whole turn to basically input attacks and stuff. So the animation needs to be fast, but it should still read as if she's like drawing the bow and shooting the bow. So that's really kind of what we're going for. The So if we play the animation as is, it's very fast, right? So you can barely see what's going on. I'm actually going to go and look at the game again real quick and just kind of see how fast that animation is. So if we go here, it is, I think, 40 frames long. Yeah, it's 40 frames long. I can switch this to FPS. Oh, no, it's 20 frames, huh? But don't... Wait a sec. Oh, you know what? No, it's snapping at 30, that's why. Yeah, it's 40 frames long. Because the 40 frames... The 40 frames lets the animation read a bit better. So that's what we're going to have to go for. So if I actually doubled this, as it currently is, right? Just take the whole thing, scale it to 40 frames. Do shooting range, right? It's a lot easier to see what's going on. Yeah. Oh, thank you. So the game is going to be the game's going to be kind of like it's an RPG, but it's mostly inspired by Japanese RPGs, which is my favorite genre of game, bar none. Um, but I kind of feel like as the design evolves, it's kind of becoming more of like a strategy RPG, kind of in the vein of Fire Emblem, except it's going to be a bit more action based. Um, but I am going to try to have like other traditional RPG elements in there. Yes, it will be turn based. It's kind of a hybrid, though. I would call it a hybrid because it's turn based in the sense that you get to kind of pick and choose your turns individually, but you also have the action element where like you can still move the character and attack freely within your turn. Um, I have to kind of work out the exact like things that enemies would do and kind of how the turn flow would work. Kind of right now, it's working on like an attack and defend phase, sort of like Fire Emblem's. Oh, sorry. Um, Sort of like how Fire Emblem has player phase and enemy phase. Yeah, it's so that's kind of like the idea. But I'm thinking I might also kind of make more like a reaction system for enemies and characters as well, where like whenever you attack, the enemy will be able to react in certain ways. Um, the I was gonna say, I'm also gonna have some sort of like way that you can predict, and I think the reason why I kind of want to say more about the strategy in it is, I think it's I think it's much more fair to be able to give players more information ahead of time. So even though it's like somewhat action based per turn, I'm going to try to offer information to players like you would see in like Fire Emblem, for example, is you'll be able to see like what the map looks like ahead of time. You'll see what kind of enemies you are. You can scan each enemy and see like what their HP number is and stuff like that. So you still have a way to plan around how you're going to like progress through combat. Um, that's kind of the idea. I think as I'm getting stream a little bit more, so I think I'm going to kind of just do random game development stuff on streams, and I think it's just a way to kind of keep me continuing to do this stuff. But yeah, I will talk more about the design on other streams. And yeah, so if we the answer the one question from where am I? How much time did this take? Well, admittedly, I've been working on this game for a very long time, but truth be told, none of it's really become like fruit any fruition. So just kind of like with the path that my life has taken, I haven't really been able to get as much done on the game itself, but I have spent many years tweaking the design, the story, the character elements, that kind of stuff. So I'm hoping at some point that I can get more into actually implementing the game, and that's what I was kind of hoping to do in more recent times. But it's just like I never really had either the confidence or like the right amount of like um, tools that I needed to get it done. Like I've learned how to do some stuff, but there are always like some gaps that I just couldn't quite fill. And I think the reason why it's going to be a little bit easier now because eventually I'm going to form a team and it's going to help me out with that. I also am getting feedback from the public, which is something I was afraid to do for a long time. So once I have that, um, it's going to make it easier. Okay, answer. Okay, so you're saying how many times I spent, how much hours? Oh, I can't even tell you. My two favorite video game franchises are Fire Emblem and Pokemon, and I've spent thousands of hours in each of them. So I I really can't say. But I do play some more traditional JRPGs as well, like Final Fantasy. I play a little bit of like Star Ocean, the Tales series, that kind of stuff. Um, I also spend a lot of time because on average those JRPGs take 60 hours to complete. Xenoblade also a big one I play. So they're just my favorite games. Do I watch VTubers? I do not. I don't have anything against VTubers though. I really don't have any problem with it at all because it's like some people just don't really want to show their face on camera, or even if you want to just be that kind of like that. It's just a character, right? Everyone has their way of you know sharing and being entertaining in a way. So I probably would watch some VTubers if I were getting around to it, but I just haven't really done that. Um, how to import rig characters from Blender to Unreal. I wish I could, but I really don't use Unreal Engine at all. Um, I think one day I'd like to spend a bit more time in Unreal. I wanted to try to build this game in Godot because I really believe in Godot's vision. I really like the interface a lot more. It's a much easier and an intuitive game engine. If I do run into too many issues, I might switch to Unreal, but my hope is that I can see this game through in Godot. And I think given how long this is going to take, Godot is going to keep advancing, and I think at some point Godot is going to be able to keep up with the needs of my game. So, so that's kind of where that's my goal at least. Um, but I know like at least with Unreal is like Unreal has really good graphics capabilities, and I think it really if I find it like I'm unable to really make the game look good in Godot, I probably would switch over to Unreal. But I think Godot can handle everything, um, from what I can tell. What is my PC specs? Hope this doesn't really come off as a shameless chill, but I do have all that information on my website. Um, so, give me one sec. I have it all right here. I think I might have to update a little bit of this stuff, but yeah, I have two workstations. I work primarily on my Windows one, um, but I do have a Linux one. It's basically recycled PC parts. But yeah, I have the primary thing to keep in mind is I'm running a AMD processor and a RX 7900 XT, and I think the graphics card is very capable. I really don't have much problems with it. I probably should have gotten something a bit more capable for video editing since I've gotten more into it, but it really I can't really complain about it at all. It does everything it needs to do. Um, let's see. And then also my software and all that good stuff. Have I tried Leak Code? I have not had the need to do so, and I'm kind of glad I never had to. Um, So I guess for the record is yeah. I guess I'll finish this off and then I'll go back to your other question. Is Yeah, so this is actually probably closer to $2,000 in total, but truth be told is the computer I'm running was basically this computer right here, but I have slowly upgraded every single part and then it became a new computer, essentially. Um, but yeah, I think it's closer to 2,000 because when I bought this graphics card, it was around $900 alone. Um, I think the processor was around 300 maybe. The SSD was actually pretty cheap. The RAM was about 100. Um, so maybe $1,500. I haven't looked at the price of graphics cards nowadays, but when I left my job in 2023, the first thing I was gonna basically save money for was just to make sure that I bought a new graphics card. Um, so that's what I did that. Anyway, let's go back to the other question, and then we'll kind of continue working on the animation. Um, so it looks like yeah, leak code. Yeah, so funny enough, I think like I'm kind of becoming, you know, my age is starting to show a lot here now, right? So I graduated college in 2015, and that's kind of when I went into the workforce as a software engineer. Um, Leak code and that kind of stuff wasn't really all that prevalent then. Um, I really just kind of proved that I could do my job with the internship I had and the grades I had and stuff like that. So I was thankfully not, I didn't need it. Plus, I also was coding for years. Like I picked it up when when I first really got into game development. I was in middle school, and that's when I learned Game Maker. So I actually had done a lot of coding already. So I was fairly proficient at it at the time, and that was good enough to get me a job. But I think nowadays it's very difficult to get a job. Yeah, I was good at math in high school, but nowadays it's like, I forget everything. Anyway, no, I appreciate the questions. I'm happy to answer them. So, anyway, let's take a look at this animation. So I was going to try to see if we can clean this up a little bit. So this is so it feels a little bit slow. So yeah. See, in high school I liked physics a lot because physics was the most applicable to game development. Um, and the other sciences were fine, but I specifically wanted to do physics so I can learn how to do physics for my games. Um, so that was kind of one of the things. Yeah, I think it really comes down to how good your teachers are. My calculus teacher in high school was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal, and if it weren't for her, like I don't think I would have nearly been as successful at calculus like that it was at in high school. It was just, but having the right teacher can really help too. Did you make the animations? These are manual. Yes, I did make these. I do have to admit that I'm not an animator. So I think one thing I do want to kind of clarify, and I try to figure out how to like make this, but like the reason why I made this channel is to share what I learn while I work on my game, and I just firmly believe that knowledge is meant to be shared, not hoarded. So I wanted to share everything, even though I'm not really a professional game developer by any means. So all this stuff that I'm kind of learning how to do, 3D modeling, animation, the programming stuff, like the art stuff, I still want to share what I've learned, even if I'm not a professional, because I still think there's value in seeing how the workflow is done. Plus, I guess it's a way to kind of document my journey too. Yeah, I do appreciate that. You know, the animation, it's fine. It gets the job done, but I appreciate that. Thank you. Um, I am going to learn a bit more about animation. I bought a course. You may have heard of the YouTuber Pierre Picot. Actually, I think I butchered his name, but he's a professional animator and he does a lot of great work. So I bought one of his courses and I'm going through it. Um, when I talk about animation on my channel, I'll make sure to reference him as well. Yeah, hiring. So, admittedly, with hiring people, my opinions have changed on that over the years. Because like when I was younger, I was very adamant about not doing that stuff. I felt like I needed to do everything by myself. Um, Nowadays, I'm a bit more open to assembling a team. Right now, I'm not really in a financial position to do so, but at some point, I will like to do that with this game. Um, but to me, I think what's more important is I understand the core concepts of the entire game development lifecycle. So if I do some of this art and animation stuff on my own, it's kind of still nice that I can at least do something, even if it's not really at high quality, because at least I understand the process. And I want to be able to understand the process of all the aspects so that I can communicate and lead a team effectively when I make the game. So I think ultimately what's going to end up happening is while I can program and do a lot of that stuff, I'm probably going to play the role of a director. Um, Plus, it just makes things a lot easier if I can understand a little bit. Yeah, yeah, Mixamo, no shame in that. I wouldn't use Mixamo animations in the final game just because they're very derivative, but I think for a prototype, that's more than fine. Um, yeah, it's cheaper to hire than learning a new skill. Yeah, I agree with that. But I was stubborn. I still like to do some of this stuff on my own just because it's fun. But I think at the end of the day, I'm really going to have to just get somebody who can do it better. Um, yeah, and that's the other thing is a long term versus short term, right? It's you pay somebody, it saves you time in the long term. Yeah. Yep. And that's kind of the thing too. Is like, and it's kind of thing like I'm starting a business of my own, so it's like one of the things that people pay for is they pay for somebody who has like extensive experience in doing what they do. Um, so people really don't mind paying that kind of money if they have it. Um, anyway, let's take a look here. So I'm going to kind of play with the timing a little bit here, so you can kind of see. Yeah. So I think the return is going to be the part that takes the longest, right? So I'm trying to think. I feel like there needs to be a little bit more. Um, it's very smooth, right? It needs to be a bit more extreme, like motion. I think. So let's see. So that's the grab. I think if I were to do something like this, right, move this down a couple frames, and move this maybe a couple frames, right? We could play the animation. You'll kind of see how the motion's a bit more exaggerated. So the draw does feel very slow, though. But that's typically how that works for this type of animation. Yeah. Yeah, motion capture, and that's really a very rising thing in animation right now. You could get like a really, so they have like Rokoku suits. Um, those are really good. I don't have one, but I know that they're around. Um, but nowadays there's AI motion capture tools, so you just take a picture on your or you take a video on your phone, and those tools can still like relatively map your characters. It's not perfect, but it should save a ton of time. That is one thing I was actually going to look into myself. Is I have a room over here that's basically empty. I was just going to turn it into a little room where I could do some motion capture, and then I can kind of build animations that way. Yeah, it really kind of depends on the type of animation you're going for. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, still feels a little bit slow. Ooh. Okay, let me move. So this is the full draw, right? Let's move this to here. Could play with this all day. But, let's see. I think between the draw and the release, I think it was better where it was. So let's see if I move this to frame 20. Let's see what happens. I'm going to move this. Okay, that's way too fast. Yeah. Yeah, the release lacks impact. A drawing hand reacting more to letting go of the arrow can help. Yeah. So that's actually a really great point. So yeah, let me play the animation again just so we can kind of see how this looks. Yeah, I think having the draw be pretty long is pretty cool. Let's kind of keep it that way. Right. So this is where the release happens, right? I'm trying to think why. Yeah, so she releases. But what's the difference between? Oh, I think this is just to sustain a release, right? I'm gonna just delete this frame for now. Let's just see what happens. No, we need that. Yeah. Okay, so I think another thing I can do. Wait, I want to return that frame. Yeah, there we go. So have her hold. That helps a lot. So have her draw the bow, hold it for a couple frames, and then release it. So that's good. Yeah, thank you. I mean, I guess part of the stream is also answering questions too. But I think that's kind of what I'm kind of learning about streaming is I'm doing work, yeah, and I'm trying to teach things here, but I think engaging with the audience is the most important thing. So even if it takes a bit longer, it's worth the time, I think. And I like answering these questions here too. I was gonna say, so release the drawing hand. Okay, as I actually wanted to touch upon something I think is really important. Let's see. So yeah, you hold the bow for a couple frames, and then you release, right? So her hand releases. Okay, so on frame 28, so what I could do here, let's go to pose mode. There's a difference kind of knowing how you want to animate your characters. There's a So if you wanted to animate for realism, I think this would probably be a bit more accurate to that. Now I don't have a particular reference, but if you were to watch an archer, they're basically just gonna like pluck their hand to release the arrow. They're not gonna really recoil in the same way in real life. Um, they But when you're making a stylized animation for like an anime cartoony kind of game, you want to emphasize more motion, right? It's just going to look and feel better. Um, so it's really kind of understanding the kind of medium that you're going for, or the style that you're going for. So I think we could end up there could be a big benefit in exaggerating this motion with her hand, probably pulling it back a lot further like this, right? So let's go ahead and give that a try. Yeah, see, it makes a big difference. Now there's other aspects too, like I could exaggerate probably the body motion. I want to do something with the legs, but I don't particularly know what to do with them. They still kind of need to be relatively in place. Um, I think maybe what I could do is maybe like when she steps into she could step into position, right? So I could probably even like move this one over here. Of course, now she's kind of leaning to the side, but that's not quite what we want. All right, let's go back to it. Yeah, see, And this is another trick the animation that I have learned is that you can build in like these little recoils and stuff like that just to add a little bit of motion flair or emotional flair. Um, and it can help. I think also kind of having your animations a bit more parabolic in general can help a lot too with the motion. Another thing I need to mess with too is animation curves. Um, but I don't think I'm going to do that right now just because I got to spend a little more time researching that. Um, but let me know what you think. You think we could stop here, or do more editing? I'm good with whatever. Um, Also, to answer your question in the chat here, what is my daily job or background and experience? Um, yeah, so that's a weird one, right? Because I am not currently employed, but I am working on starting a business, so that's going to be what my job's going to become. Um, but yeah, my experience is traditional application development, software engineering. I went to school to learn how to write code, basically for applications, IT related stuff. So not very low level stuff. In school, it was mostly Java, but in the workforce, I spent a lot of time doing, let's see, kind of like I've done various things with .NET, still like Java, but a derivative of Java called Groovy. I did a lot of that. The last 4 years I was working, I did more AWS cloud stuff, um, which involved a lot of like Node.js programming, which is JavaScript. Did a little Python too at first until the team abandoned it. Um, so we did a lot of stuff like that, or that's my traditional experience. I also have experience with web development because when I was an intern, I did a lot of that. Um, so now basically what I'm trying to do with the business that I'm starting is I want to bridge my software engineering experience with my passion for the game industry. So I kind of thought the best way to move forward was just to leverage my existing skill set. Rather than trying to go and make a game directly, I wanted to do something that was a bit more stable. But I do still want to make my game, so I think I'm going to plan out a little bit more how we would tackle that. But I think I just need some sort of stable income. Plus, I really just hate working for a corporation. I really struggle doing other people's work. I'd like to do something that's a bit more stuff that like I'm specifically interested in doing. Um, I have a lot of fun learning about web frameworks nowadays. I liked doing a lot more web development, but the job I was working at it was really departed from that. Um, so that's like something I very much like to do. But I do also think there's value in trying to help game studios come to life with some IT related stuff. I know game programmers probably know how to do websites and stuff like that, but I think the reality also is just that sometimes they don't have the time to do that stuff. Um, and that's kind of where I was thinking is like I'll start with websites, but I'm going to slowly expand into some of my other experiences too. Like I can help with setting up cloud stuff, some continuous integration stuff. So that's kind of my goal. And I think another thing I like to think about is I want to follow the Epic Games model, right? So Epic Games has made a huge success with Unreal Engine, and a large part of that is because they made Fortnite with it, right? So if I can prove that I can use my skill set to help other people, but I also apply it to my own game studio, there could be a lot to be said about that, right? Yeah, AWS. I think it depends on what it's for, but I worked for a very large financial institution who has a very low risk tolerance, so they're going to pick something that is very broadly known and has many years of development behind it. So AWS is very appealing to a very large enterprise. Um, there might be other options as well, as far as it comes to game studios, and it really ultimately just comes down to who it's for. Yeah, microservices. You know, it's funny. It's kind of like the memes like "fuck, go back," right? Because we started with monoliths, right? Monoliths, you have these like millions lines of code. You have this one big project, it takes forever to download, all that stuff. And then we went to microservices, and then it was just like, wait, I have a million projects now. There are all these microservices. It's like I have one project just just creates a SQSQ, and I don't. It's just like, okay, well, it's like it's going from one really big project with a million files to a million projects with one file, right? And it's just so it's like it's almost like we went backwards, right? Yeah, that's fair. Um, Unreal Engine definitely was successful, but I do like to think that Fortnite is has played is so big that's helped Epic Games a ton. But if anything, it just proves that the engine works because he's like the team uses it internally, right? So yeah, it's a good thing to think about. So anyway, so here's the animation, right? Um, so we can compare that with the old one, right? So we got the this one. Okay, so this one's actually 20 frames long. And it's a lot snappier. Um, okay, so I want to talk about. Let's talk about integrating this stuff into Godot. So I think what I will say right now is if we look at the game, um, so I'll just kind of overview it in the code right now before we export anything. Um, if we look at the game itself, you have the character, and then she also has the bow in her right hand. So I instantiate the bow. I'm gonna put the slow motion on. Don't mind the jiggle physics; it gets really janky in the slow motion. Yeah, let me full screen this. Well, basically, it really depends. Kind of like it depends on several factors about how you would want to like implement this. Um, but basically, you want to in this case because my game requires separate like bow models like because you can change your weapons um and there's also the need to have reusable animations. I want to try to decouple the bow from the character as much as possible um in a game like Super Smash Brothers because the character actually I'll show something in a moment here. So I kind of wanted to show a little bit about how this works in slow motion. So basically, there's the three aspects. There's the bow, the character, and the arrow. And the arrow is going to spawn kind of while this animation happens. Um, so it's but if we look at a game like Smash Bros, let me see if I can bring up something real quick. Take a character. I know like Link shoots a bow, but I think Byleth is actually a more appropriate example because it's slower. Let me find it. Here we go. So if we look at this, um, you have there's actually a lot of recoil stuff, and honestly, I think Super Smash Brothers is a really great animation resource. Um, but I think the point I wanted to make here is that what they do in Smash Brothers is they actually bake all the weapons into the character's model. Um, So like if you were to like rip Byleth's model from Super Smash Brothers, you would find that the model itself has like his sword, his bow, his axe, and his lance in it. Um, so the game actually, or in Smash Brothers, that's fine because you can tightly couple the animation because it's not like you're trying to swap his bows out with other characters or you're trying to change the bow itself or anything like that. And so if we look at like kind of how the animation works, you can't really see it here, but the game is actually a little bit sneaky. It'll actually like phase the bow in like around this frame. Um and then and then it'll just they'll animate all that stuff directly into the character. So I think it's really a matter of what your intent is. Yeah. But I think in this case too, I've also am going to probably refactor the way I have the system working in this game. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make all these static data files here for all the, I call them arts, which are your attacks. Um, and then that's kind of how. So I want to be able to say like, okay, well I'm going to make these resource files in Godot, and I can kind of talk. I could put all the data in here about like what the attack does, what type of attack it is. I could put some frame data in here as well. Um, so basically, if we look at the bow attack, right? Um, and I've kind of hardwired this in a way so that on the metadata for the bow attack, I can put an animation file here. So this attack bow B1 is the naming convention I used. So what I can do is whenever I like create the character static data, if I could find it somewhere, um, there's like her weapons, and you can see like there's the assigned art for the basic, which is this bow one. So when the game loads, it's going to go through all of your weapons and all of the arts that are assigned to them. And the the and then what it's going to do, actually I may as well just pull the script up. It's probably going to open VS Code. Yeah, that's fine. um, Might be kind of hard to see. I'll zoom in a little bit. So whenever the character loads into combat, it's going to go through all of, so I store the arts onto the weapons. um, So it's going to loop through all the characters' three weapons, and it's going to grab their basic art, their specials, and then it's going to find the metadata in that. Um, it's going to be, so basically what it's going to look for is make sure that that metadata exists, and the art actually it does exist as well, and then it loads the animation from the metadata. So if we look kind of at it, um, uh, um, so there's this basic art, which is assigned art, and then you can see, it's going to be really hard to see. Um, it can go through the metadata, it can find the metadata animation, it just grabs it here. So what I did do, and I'll show that as well. Um, my new business, it's called Nunkware Digital. So basically everything dealing with me has Nunk in the branding. It's an old nickname that I had as a child. It's kind of stuck. But yeah, it's going to kind of start off slowly as a web design business, and eventually it's going to evolve into kind of just like I help game studios set up their IT infrastructure to help them be more efficient. Am I looking for venture capital? I don't think it's necessary. I think with what I have right now, I'm able to get by. I do have a coach. I also am working with a marketing team now. So I'm just going to kind of look for clients that are probably like upstart game studios. Um, and I'm going to kind of help set up their websites. I'm going to help set up their version controller infrastructure and all that stuff like that. It's going to be mostly just a service business. I'm not really going to sell a product or anything like that. I think I could do a lot of it kind of in a similar manner to like how a copywriter would function. Except not as a copywriter, but like the business model of like I'm a consultant basically. Yeah. The what else was I gonna say? Um, Yeah, so I'll talk about also how, and you don't necessarily need to set up your game this way. I think we'll have to set up a more basic example potentially. Maybe we'll just open like a new project and we'll do that. Um, but there's all this kind of complicated layer stuff here. But I want to go back to kind of showing you. So basically, what's really cool, you can do this in Godot. Um, I don't know if this is really standard or not, to be honest with you. But what you can do is you can create these. So if we look at our bow here, so the bow has a default, a fire, and a pullback animation, right? Um, whenever I export this animation from Blender, I load it into Godot, I can save the I could save it here, but I could also choose advanced import options. Oh, this is neat. Um, so for the animations, I could save them as separate files, right? So save the file, um, and then I use this to make my animations reusable um, for other characters. So I could take, yeah, and then I just make sure that. So another thing you can do is when you're in Blender, you can create multiple animations, and you can make that essentially an animation library. Um, and then when you import it into Godot, it will create these animation files for you. And that's how I linked this to the arts metadata here. And then I just kind of copy that over to the character at runtime so that I can transfer that animation over. Otherwise, you could also depending on kind of what you want to do with your game, you can also just add it directly to the character's animation player to test it, um, and stuff like that. So there's that aspect of it too. Um, so one thing we could do is see what it looks like to import the bow animation. So let's go ahead and export our bow. And we'll start with that. So if we look at the, let's actually take a look at the old bow in here first. We'll use this as a reference. So the bow has its own states, right? For some reason this is not playing, but that's fine. Animation tree. Let's make things a little easier. Yeah, it looks like it's something stuck on it. That's fine. But yeah, let's talk about that. So here's what I'm going to do. We'll keep this project as a reference point. Yeah. Yeah. I think Godot's biggest weakness is the rendering part. Um, but that kind of just goes without saying. And it's kind of just more of the fact that Unreal Engine has just had years ahead of it. Um, but I do think what makes Godot so great, besides the fact that it's free and open source, is the fact that it's really just a very nice and easy to use piece of software. Um, I've used Unity before, and I really don't like Unity all that much. I feel like Godot took a lot of concepts that Unity has and just made it easier to use. Like the prefab system in Unity is just scenes in Godot, and scenes are just what drives like everything. It's just much more intuitive. Um, so anyway, yeah, here's what we can do. Actually, yeah, let's start with this. Let's go back to the bow. So the bow here, at the default, isn't red irritating. Oh, on the Godot, yeah. Um, I just I it's fine to me. I guess it could depends. But I change the colors all the time. Like I do it on my desktop as well. I get bored quickly of the colors, so I switch them a lot. I do the same thing here in Godot, but I could change it. Let's see. I'm trying to think where I do the themes. I think it's in here. Okay, so I do. If I just did like start dark theme. Um, Default. Trying to think what's OLED. Oh, that's too black. Okay, never mind. Let's go with the Breeze Dark. Yeah, that's fine for now. So yeah, so let's start with the bow. So the way I was going to integrate this in the game is let's go ahead and export this, right? So we're going to do, I'm just going to export it as a GLTF. And then in my game itself. Okay, so this is in the game itself. Go to weapons, bow, create a new folder. So this will be bow 1. So the way I kind of organize this, I don't think the organization is super important at this state in the game, but all the weapons kind of have like these microcodes on them, like bow 1. Godot, badly designed under the hood. What software is, though? That's what I'd like to say. But yeah, nah, I get that. So, what happens a lot, and I mean, I've seen this in real time, is that projects might have like a very good like design foundation at the beginning, but because tech changes so fast and then the people as well change so fast, you find that that architecture slowly degrades over time. um it's so yeah, trying to keep the software to be like as um as good as it was is at the first time. Yeah, it's just an uphill battle. And as software devs, we all like to share our opinion about how we should organize code and all that stuff, but the reality is just that there's only so much you can do. Um, anyway, so I'm going to export the bow. And I also want to just double check real quick. If I look at the bow, it does come with the default, the fire, and the pushback animation. So let's just do that. So I click this. I saved an export preset here for the weapon, which includes the visible objects, the data. Do I have modifiers? I do, right? I think I could apply the modifiers. Material, no export. Yeah, shape key normals. I don't really have shape keys, but that's fine. Yep, armature looks good. Maybe I should show these just so we have them. Shape keys, we don't really need. Export deformation bones only. Skinning. It's fine, it's whatever, it's default. The animation though, let's get the animation. This action should work. I kind of find with the GLTF exporter and Blender is that sometimes these features aren't like completely supported. Like this actions feature didn't work at all in the previous versions of Blender. I think it works now though. I'd have to use this NLA tracks, but we'll use this actions here, and that should just take everything here. I mean everything else I think I could just leave as is. We'll just export it. Now if we open the game, it should import the bow into this bow 1 folder. And we should see it has the animations if we play it. Um, yeah, I have my opinions on object-oriented programming, but maybe I'll save that for a different time. Okay, so we got the bow in here. I also did recognize the fact that this is not all textured. Um, Not going to worry about that too much right now. But yeah, so we got the bow. It's rigged, it's animated, it looks good. So we're going to import it. I'm going to go ahead and do a new inherited scene with the bow in it. And then you can see that there's bones on it. So it's got the bow. Yeah, it's got the various bones. It should be good to go. There's the pullback, and then there's the release. So the default. Okay. So in the animation, we did actually hook the IK up. I think in Godot, oops, the IK bone is deprecated. I'd have to find out what the replacement is. But for the purpose of what I'm using this for, I actually didn't really care too much. Um, but but with the three states that we have, we'll probably want to have that IK bone at some point implemented. Just so we can like get that release, or we can get the string to follow the player's hand better. But it looks like we at least have the code here. So let me just go ahead. We'll save this as bow1 in the bow folder. Wait, no. It's in the models. Bow1. I'm going to just keep the naming convention. Right. And I'm just going to also double check. I think I put a script on here too, right? So yeah, there's this script here, which is just bow model. And then all this script really did was just, it gives you the ability to configure this animation tree. So like, configured this in a way that, actually, let me come back to that later. So we made this animation tree, right? So let me go ahead and just plop this in here. I think it'll just work. So let's go ahead, take a look. But it's kind of, all right, animation player, let's just assign this animation player. It should work better. Okay, so if I click fire, it doesn't do anything. The pullback works, that looks good. So if I pull back and I click fire, it doesn't, okay, it's like having trouble. Okay, fire. Okay, so this animation is fire. Okay, sorry, release. Okay, so I think I changed the name of the animation by accident. I think this will work now. Yeah, there we go. So, okay, let me take a minute to talk about this setup, right? So what I'm going to do, so let's see. If we go back, I think if we talked about it in the previous stream, it's going to change a little bit given how we kind of like made this animation here. Um, but the way I implemented this in the game originally, I actually didn't even have a string on the other bow, so I just didn't worry about it. I think it's going to be a little more complicated with the string because you have to get the string to line up with the character's hand, and that's going to be a bit trickier. I think that would involve using the IK bone properly. Um, let's just start simple for now. But the way it was done simply was just I created this default state, I created the pullback state like this, and then the fire state. And the fire is just an animation that plays once you release the bow. And then I drove this through code. So in Godot, what I did was I created this animation tree. Sorry, this animation player or tree. Yeah, here. And this is how we can drive the animation of the bow. So this is pullback state, which is actually just a blend space, right? So I can move between 0 and 1. So this transfers between the default state and the pullback state. So just going to kind of use that. So if you're not familiar with a blend tree, basically in 3D, and I think this is one of the advantages 3D has over 2D, at least traditionally speaking, is with the bone system, you can interpolate positions of bones. So that does allow for really cool things like animation blending to exist. So if you could say like, okay, this state's the default, this one's the pullback. Godot knows how to go from that state to that state and in between. So there's also this release animation, and I made this one shot right here. So one shot allows you to play an animation, basically just a fire the animation, right? Blink. So there's so we can control the animations. So we could control the default state, and we could control the pullback by making a ratio between. So if we know like which frames the character is pulling the bow, right? We can set the pullback to 0, like when she grabs it, and then we can make a ratio between the frame she starts pulling it and the frame that she ends it, and then just set that pullback parameter that way. And then what you can do is once she releases the bow, you can use this one shot, this fire here, and just set it to fire, and then just let it play the animation. So we'll have to control this animation largely through code, but we can use this state machine to help us do that. Another thing I forgot to do was apply the toon shader to this. So I just take the model and I just go to surface material override and I just put it here. We'll use this one for now. Just the wooden bows material. Also very temporary. So yeah, let's go ahead and save that. And then because I have the state machine, I do want to have the script attached here. There's this bow.model.gd. We're going to attach it to bow itself. And I'll bring that code back up because it should make a little more sense now. You get the reference to the animation tree. And then what I do is I made a getter setter for the pullback. So you could set the pullback outside of this bow model. So like let's say the character's animation. And then it's just going to set it as a ratio, basically, this blend position. And then there's this fire function. So the function's just going to play, it's going to tell this fire request. So if we go over to the animation tree, I do wish like with the state machine stuff this is a bit more like documented about like what features you have, but you are able to control a lot of these parameters through the code. So you hit this parameters fire request, and if you say true, it actually just sets it to fire basically. So that's how we can control it. It's just kind of just an interface for that. Um, so we have the script here. We have the model. So now what we can do is to prove that it works with our game already, or if it doesn't, we'll okay, apparently this is all right. Do I need that model? No, I don't. I don't think so. We'll find out. I'm gonna close this one for now. So let's wire it up. So instead of using the old bow, we hook up this new one, right? Um, so one thing we can try is we can just go to the character, and we can just click the right hand right here and just plop the bow scene in there. And we can see that she holds it. So I should also talk about how this works too. So what you do is, so you know like how in our animation in Blender, we have the bow bone with a constraint. Let's go actually click it. We have this constraint here that's copy transforms. Where is it? Yeah. And it attaches to this weapon bone, which is not quite the hand bone, but it's a bone that's parented to the hand that we can orient kind of so that like a character can hold a weapon and control it. So we just basically can do a very similar thing in Godot, and that's done using this weapon, this bone attachment node. So the bone attachment node, actually, if we go to, so this is just the base scene for the character. So if we look at the bone attachment node, basically what you do is you select bone attachment and you just pick the bone that you want it to be. This is the weapon. And then Godot handles letting you, this node will always follow the transform of the bone. So then that means you could just put anything as a child of that. Like I have these weapon handle L and R. They're just really just references. They're just nested. I don't know if you necessarily need them, but this does let me do a little transform. Like I just turn it 90 degrees basically, for example. You could do the same thing. And then I also referenced it by name here with the prefix. Just to make it easier to find it when in scripts. And then it just makes it real easy. You could put anything as a child of that. And now she's holding it. So now no matter what animation she does, she'll hold it. And it will follow that motion. So it's a pretty easy thing to do, actually. Let's go ahead and talk about the next portion of this. I actually don't want this bow to stay here. This was just a test. I kind of wired the game up so that the bow model will spawn with the appropriate bow. So let's go ahead and look at her data. So we got the data here, right? Here's bow 0. This is the base bow. This is, if you look at this bow here, it's a wooden bow and it has a metadata. So this metadata scene is actually just the model itself. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to, and that's not an axe, by the way, I should change that, but it's a, I'm just going to kind of wire it the way the game is. The more important part is the fact that you're going to see that the new bow will spawn in, basically. So let me go to my data stack. There's weapons right here. There's bow. I'm just going to copy this. Duplicate it. Just call it bow 1. And then we're going to edit it here. This is, I'm just going to call it iron bow. It doesn't have a texture, so you can't really tell it's going to be a bow. Let's get a little bit more might as well so we can kind of see the difference. Um, and then this metadata scene. So what I can do is I can just kind of drag the bow 1 scene in there, and now it creates a reference to it. And this is a resource file. So what I did to make the resources, there should be a weapon class somewhere in here. I think it's in this data model. Here we go. So if we go to weapon, this is a resource. So that allows you in Godot to basically make it so you can edit properties in the editor, but it's not a scene. So the resource itself is not a scene, so it's not going to have like nodes, but it does let you basically configure data for the game. So it's one way you can do it. Otherwise, I could probably do all this stuff with just like JSON files, which has its own advantages and disadvantages. But I wanted to try like learning how to do it in a more native Godot way. The downside here is that there's going to be a ton of files here, but the good thing about it is that I can quickly tweak it in the editor, and that's just really cool. So, plus I can drag them directly. I can drag references to it. It lets me do things like this metadata, so that it's much easier to kind of see what's going on. So now we got this bow 1, right? Let me fix my bow 0, actually, to make this bow. Save that. Bow 1. So we got bow 1 here. I got to change this name. So, wait a second. And then let's go ahead, go back to the character's data, right? I think this is, yeah, I think this is just referencing. Go to weapon. Instead of this one being bow 0, we're just going to quick load bow 1. Here we go. We could save this. Now it should spawn in if it worked properly. Yeah, it still gave me a problem. Okay. So I think the reason why that happened is because this gets out of sync. I just had to reset it. See, now the new bow spawns in. So you can kind of see how like this bow's string is all wonky. I think the way we would fix that is we would use the IK to kind of to fix that. But I'm going to have to look into that a little bit more. But generally speaking, this is how this would integrate in the game. You would load your bow model. You got the 3 states. And then then I have the code. So let's talk about the code that yeah, let's talk about the code that kind of drives this animation. So yeah, see, that one doesn't even have. So let's talk about that. So there, I had to do a little bit of tweaking to this. So because I set up the arts in a similar way to the weapons and the other static data. So let's take a look at the bow animation, right? So there's this animation scene and there's an animation. So the animation's just the raw file. Can export it in the same way. So we should probably export that other animation at some point. But if we look at this projectile scene, this is to give animations a little bit more control. So this is really just what the arrow is. The arrow itself has some code. This one has a reference to the bow itself to control the bow's pullback. There's the hand target, which would be the characters attacking the weapon L and the weapon R. So there's the bow. I'm trying to think. So whenever this animation spawns, right? So let's go back to the player. Attempted art. So yeah. So there's this logic here. I'm not going to really talk about this here. I can at some point, but it's it's going to take some time. But basically, what we need to know is that whenever this animation spawns as art, the animation has a reference to the hand and the bow weapon. So this stuff will get set. I'm trying to remember where that is, right? Here, let's just do this. So if we look at, it's been a minute since I've looked at this code. The projectile itself. So let's look at the bow attack. So with this art, I think this is what happens. If I go to the art class, right? So the art's attached to the character. Okay, this is what happens. So whenever the art animation plays, it has a reference to the character that's playing and then the enemy as well. So it will have access to... So the art itself has access to that information when it's instantiated. So this projectile, because it's an art animation as well, it does have this init function where I could set the attacker and the target. The bow weapon is actually already assumed to be attached to the character, so that's why that's there. And then basically there's this this logic here is to drive basically when, so we set the pull back to 0, but basically there's logic here to drive this animation. Yep. Let's go back. This is a projectile, so the projectile is kind of whatever, but this code's in here. And like I said, this is probably could be organized a lot better, in a lot better way, but this was just the way I was able to get it to work. But because I wanted to make the static data section, I have this animation in the scene. So the animation plays on the player. This projectile kind of drives the bow animation. So there's a weapon. This here is kind of just a way to say, okay, the strike frame is where... The strike frame is the frame where the hitbox would normally connect with the enemy, but this is a bow, so the projectile actually controls the damage rather than the bow like actually hitting, or like if it was a sword, the strike frame is when this like hitbox would actually make contact and when you would see the damage number appear. But instead the strike frame is going to be used for when the character releases the bow, the arrow. So we could say from frame 0 to the arrow, this is when once this timer expires, that's when the arrow should be released. We're going to set a flag to tell the arrow to release. We're going to tell the weapon to play its fire animation. And then it's going to be, and then we're just going to turn on this little GPU trail, basically. So that's what that's about. And then there's this timeout here. This timeout here is just for the lifetime of the projectile itself. That way the projectile doesn't live forever in the scene in case like you miss. This just kills it after 5 seconds. This here is going to control the pullback. This also controls the... So this here controls the projectile's position. It's hard to see in the game engine itself because of the way the camera is. It would take too long to fix that, but basically the arrow spawns in her hand, and then it's just gonna like follow the position of her hand while she's pulling it back, and that's what that logic's for. And then there's the logic here to also just kind of make a ratio for the pullback, which is basically just add it, basically make it from 0 to 1. And then if it's fired, it's just going to make it a projectile. It's just going to go straight, basically. And then this logic here is just to actually, if it hits the enemy, apply damage and kill the projectile. So that's really all that does. So basically, the way this code works is that now it's a little bit strange to have the projectile kind of control the bow animation as well. It's not really ideal, but in this context I think it's okay just because that's the way this system is set up. I wanted to make it so that with all the static data I had a singular scene that helps drive how the attack works. So if it has this meta animation scene, it drives the entire animation process. So from what the animation the player does to what the projectile does, so on and so forth. This is a lot simpler for a sword because a sword just sticks in the player's hand. You just have the animation apply and then a hitbox shows up. So it's with the bow it's a bit harder because you need the projectile to be involved. You have animate, and then that's how it's set up in the game here. So if I swap between these, you can see how like it goes from the new model, which is much larger. So I'd have to look into how the IK works in Godot again because it's replaced by something else because there's no IK bone anymore. Another way I could potentially do this is with the animation we have, we could potentially fake the position of the bow and the string to match up with her hands a bit better. So I was thinking, so there's ways I could do it that way. The IK might be a bit nicer, and I could drive it right through that projectile code as well. Because then all you really do is you just do it the same way we did it in Blender. Where that line of code, so like right here where you have the bow weapon, here's the handle R. You have the hand target. You could do the same thing where you would just put the IK bone of the bow itself as a child of this hand target. And then it should just work. You know, just control which frames that she grabs the bow, which one she doesn't. So I'd have to put that metadata in there. So I think the last thing we can do here is we can export this newer animation. So I think we want to kind of show you, this is also a bit more specific to my game code, but I think a couple of things we want to note here is that this is a 60 frames per second animation, right? So so we want to know basically a couple of things. So we want to know which frame she grabs the bow, but I don't have the logic in there right now to do that. So we want to know basically the strike frame. So the strike frame is going to be when she releases it. So frame 24. Then we're going to know a frame where she can cancel the animation, which would be basically, and when you say cancel, that's going to be like you can interrupt the animation without, you know, having the whole animation play. So you go to your next attack. So this frame 30 is the cancel frame, and frame 24 is the strike frame. So we want to know that, right? I think another thing I'm going to do, I want to talk about another really helpful thing that you can do to organize your animation work a little better. I gotta see if I can find the file real quick. So what you can do, this is what you can do is you can create an animation library. So instead of having this bow animation live in the character's model file, I'm going to instead transfer this over to a animation library file. So this so we have this bow blend. So actually, I think I might just make a duplicate of this for now, but actually let's just use the same file. So I create a separate Blender file, right? And basically what I did was I used the character skeleton as a library override, kind of like what we did with the bow earlier. So what you do is you go File, Link, you find the character's rig, and then you can import that, make it a library override so you can actually use it in here. And then now what I can do is I can take these animations. Okay, see, like there's one right here. I could just kind of pull this, right? And I can instead kind of copy this over. So I'm just going to hit copy. And we'll make it a fake user. So now we have the bow animation in this file itself. So it doesn't have the naming convention. That's fine. But we'll keep it that way. So in this library, so one thing I also kind of find that with Blender is if you're exporting the model with an animation, it takes a lot longer to export it. So kind of also separating the animation like this while still kind of retaining the rig from the linked file, it's very valuable. And then that way I don't need to keep the animation in the model file. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to save this. And if I export this to GLTF, I can export it into the game itself. Under animations, there's this bow here, and this bow file. What we're going to want to do is we want to grab. I'm trying to think, which one is this? It's weapon animation. I think it's this one, right? There's really no model to worry about, so if I just do this, make sure export the animation. Make sure it's still visible though, because the rig's still kind of important. Like actions, just click OK. And then I'll export the animations. Actually, it looks like there was an error. Okay, but it doesn't make any sense. Let me see if something happened. No, it failed. Okay. Should work. Let me see what's going on. Let's just do main. Yeah, it's giving me a problem right now. This is probably just because newer versions of Blender, can't expect everything to work perfectly. Let me Let me just try making this as a new one. Save the animation. Let's try it as NLA tracks. Let's export it that way. Okay, so that works. Let's go ahead and this bow animation also needs to be on the NLA track. So yeah, I think the issue probably was because of these library animations right here causing issues. Let's try exporting again with okay, so now it should be a bit better. So we go to animations, bow. There's this bow one right here. What we're actually going to do now in Godot is we're going to go ahead and we're going to turn this into an animation library. So what you can do is you hit go to this import tab here, import it as an animation library, and then we're going to want to make sure that 60 XPS, right? Just re-import it. This one, yeah, trimming is fine. We can save that. And I'm also going to go here, hit animation player, bow animation, and we'll just save this to file, right? Animation bow. Just click save, right? Cancel. Let's see. Let's just do it this way. So animation save paths, animation bow. Select current folder. No. Okay. There we go. And then we won't overwrite the other ones. Set paths, re-import it. And then now I should see this bow animation file. I actually didn't do it as a T-res. I should have saved it as a T-res. But if we go here now, we should be able to swap this bow animation with the one that's in the bow now. So let me do that. Right. So with some of the metadata, so let's see. See, now it uses the new one, which is a lot slower. But you can tell it's a new animation and not the original. So that's how you can make your animations reusable. So what's kind of cool is that you can see that the other two in the combo are still the same. And it also kind of just shows you that inside the game, we actually want this to be a tad bit faster. So if we scaled it down to like 30 frames, that's like what you could do. But actually instead of that, we're going to go and do it here. So bow animation, scale to 30. And our release frames are a bit different now. That's fine though, but you can see. So let's see. Let's set my frame rate to the scene as 60. There we go. Save that, export again. Now if we go back to Godot, I think it just updates automatically. Yeah, see, it's faster now. So, so that's a way you can do that. So anyway, so I think this is where I'm going to end the stream for today. Are there any additional questions or anything that anyone else wants to ask? Otherwise, I do really appreciate the time. Thank you all for stopping in and made this nice and engaging stream today, so I really appreciate that. I'm going to have to kind of scrub through this footage for the full video, but I might have to redo some things just to make it a little bit easier to follow in the video. But other than that, I'm going to work through a couple shorts first, and then I'll get the full video out. I'm going to try to I don't particularly want to say it's going to lower the quality of my videos. It might, but I want to just try to edit in a way that's much more efficient and like effective for me to get content out more quickly. So I'm going to have to make some experiments. Um, but I hope that at least the quality of the information will still remain intact. I just don't think I will use as much flashy editing in this one. We'll have to see how it goes. But anyway, thank you all. Appreciate it, and I'll see you around in the next stream.